Let's take a closer look at the new McLaren W1 and let's compare it to the Ferrari F80. First of all, it's hard to be the successor of the legendary P1. The P1 had an outstanding design which worked aerodynamically at the same time. It had a look like no other car before, with its slightly arrogant smile and the low rear end with the scooper-like rear wing. The W1 now is more like just another McLaren. We see familiar elements, and in terms of aerodynamics on first look it makes sense, but it's not as unique as the P1. But more on that later. Now let's focus on technology. McLaren's priority for the W1 was that it should be a driver's car, so they stick with the hydraulic steering for better feel and put low weight at the top of their list. McLaren designed a new 4-liter flat-plane V8 biturbo with cold V and 928 horsepower. They combined it with an 8-speed gearbox without reverse to save weight. You can see that the whole gearbox is shifted to the right to make space for the 347 horsepower electric motor at the side. That experience might be useful for the huge MGUK for 2026 in F1. You can see that the electric motor connects to the final drive of the car, which means, in contrast to the F80, that the McLaren can drive electrically as well. So it can reverse electrically only. But the electric motor here shouldn't be able to start the engine and they would need a separate starter. It is powered by a 1.4 kilowatt-hour battery. The Ferrari has more than 50% more capacity. So McLaren reduced the size of the battery to save weight, put the fuel tank on top like in F1 and inclined the whole drivetrain to make space for the diffuser by 3 degrees. In terms of structure, they use a carbon monocoque with molded-in seats for a direct connection to the car and to save weight. Steering wheel and pedals are adjustable, and because of the lack of seats, they could also reduce the length of the tub by 7 centimeters, which means lower weight again. At front and rear, McLaren uses very simple looking metal frames. Some people might say it looks like from a DIY shop. Also, the suspension is a lot simpler than the Ferraris. They use double wishbone suspension all around, but no pushrod design. At the front we can see a heave spring element. At the back we see a huge anti-roll bar with active elements. The Ferrari has a full active suspension to keep the floor level to the ground. Because of their cold V design, the engine bay is flatter and they have more usable space above the engine. So the W1 offers a trunk behind the passengers. The F80 doesn't have that. And now let's talk about aerodynamics. There are many comments about the downforce figures in my F80 video. Just to explain that again, I recalculated all downforce figures of all these cars to 250 km per hour, so that we can compare the cars. At 250, the W1 has 800 kg of downforce, which is more than 25% less than the F80. But we have to keep in mind that the W1 has a 140 kg lighter dry weight than the F80. And because the F80 is a far more complex car, there are more fluids to fill into the car. So the difference between dry weight and ready-to-drive weight might be higher for the F80. Also, McLaren concentrated on floor performance, but they did it in a more conventional way. They have a big splitter and front diffusers which pump air through the front wheel arches. Interesting is here the large pocket which raises the floor leading edge to push more air underneath the car for more downforce. To keep the front wheel wake away from the rear intake, McLaren uses a large barge board in the door which extends to the mirrors. To enable this feature, they changed to gull-wing doors, so they don't need hinges at the front anymore. The front splitter is active and can change its angle. Aero elements in the upper door part guide clean air down to the rear intake. Just like the Ferrari, we see radiators at the sides and in the center. The P1 had 2 outlets to guide the low-energy cooling air along the sides and to keep the center clean for the engine's air intake. The W1 does not do that. The rear wing can move up to 300 mm further back to position its low-pressure area above the diffuser exit and to pull more air out, in other words, for more downforce. Compared to the F80, the wing is very low. The cockpit is very simple with familiar steering wheel and somehow doesn't look like a hypercar. Some buttons have been positioned in the ceiling to keep the dashboard clean. In terms of performance figures, the McLaren is very similar to the Ferrari. 0 to 100 in 2.7 seconds, a bit slower because of rear-wheel drive, while the Ferrari has all-wheel drive. 0 to 200 in 5.8 seconds, 0 to 300 in 12.7 seconds. The P1 needed 16.5 seconds. So McLaren created a new hypercar which is a lot simpler than the Ferrari F80, hence a lot lighter, and which should provide very similar performance. Plus points are that the McLaren has a trunk and can drive electrically, at least short distances, which might be useful for customers of these cars. Most will never see a racetrack and be more in traffic jams. The McLaren is with £2 million after tax cheap compared to the Ferrari, which cost £3 million before tax. It's also more exclusive as there are only 399 made and they're all sold out. Still, the McLaren W1 is not really as fascinating as the old P1, but it has its advantages. Sound, for example, and that can only be better than the Ferrari. Or what do you think? Which one is your favorite? And will these cars increase in value or will they even depreciate? Let me know in the comments below and see you at the next video.